Well, hello everybody. Dion here from Solutions PT, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. That is all about our new latest historian and client from AVEVA. And with me today is Andy Graham. Hello, Andy.
Hi, Dion.
And Andy is, of course, our solutions manager at Solutions PT. And then we're very privileged this afternoon to have the one and only Ken Malloy join us all the way from Ireland. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Dan. How you doing? I'm keeping it real here. My computer says no to virtual backgrounds, so.
And whereabouts are you, Andy?
I'm near Warrington.
It looks like some kind of TV studio you're in.
Yeah, no. In light of the Premier League yesterday, I thought it'd be apt to have the Match of the Day studio.
Okay, great. Well, this webinar is of course part of our 11-week webinar series. We're at number 4. Can you believe it? Well, I wanted to say nearly halfway, but it's not nearly halfway. Well, yeah. So what has been going on? If we look, Andy, if you can bring up the screen there for me, things have really changed. This is, I suppose, our biggest release in 3 years, and one of the big changes is in branding. We are busy transitioning our branding from Wonderware to AVEVA. So a lot of you would know the Wonderware brand. It's been around for over 30 years now, and with this change, we are transitioning all the Wonderware products and a whole lot of other products and technologies into one brand, one singular AVEVA brand, but it's still underneath the skin, it's still all the same Wonderware software that you've grown to love. So to give us a little bit more insight into what this new portfolio of us looks like, I'm going to hand over to Andy.
Thanks, Dion. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so just very briefly, if you look at what AVEVA tried to deliver with their product set, it's to connect, empower and transform our customers, and they do that across all verticals, and they have done for a long time, as Dion mentioned just a moment ago, and they still have the #1 market share worldwide with over 2 million licenses sold. So you know it's vast, and it's the same Wonderware technology that Dion said under the hood. In terms of trends in the market, obviously they come through very thick and fast. I suppose very relevant to today is things like big data analytics. You may even look at something like artificial intelligence. But the key is, and the key from AVEVA is that you can take all these trends and you can adopt them and put them into the products and adopt those technologies. But the key for them is delivering that customer value through that rapid pace of change, so doing it all very quickly. With that shift in landscape, and Ken's going to be talking a bit later on very much about how things are moving from solely on-premise type solutions up to different types of architectures. So that's a very interesting talking point. And of course, we've got those evolving users through those different generations that we're seeing come through now. So then if we put this into an architecture, and you can probably very simply put this into 3 sections. If you attend our webinars, you've seen this before. Into asset location, control room, operations center, and all the way up to enterprise. That asset location layer, we are looking at products such as the AVEVA In HMI. These are all the new naming conventions for the products. AVEVA Edge, which we've got the webinar on next week. Then if moving up into the control room, you may look at something like system platform, everything that goes along with it. We can see our AVEVA historian, and that sits quite neatly in something we've not really talked about at all so far yet, but it's integral to nearly everything that you see in these types of architectures, and we'll explain why as we go through this. And then in terms of the enterprise, we're looking obviously at development and storage and analytics environments in the software as a service type solutions at that top end. Now, obviously, from a software perspective, the on-premise solutions need hardware to install on. So again, we provide best of breed products in that area so that we can ensure over for things like fault tolerance through the likes of Stratus, then we'd obviously introduce something like that. And there's a few different flavors of that now. But I'm just going to change this picture slightly because I mentioned that we've not talked about Historian yet, but if you look at the way.
And I think Ken, can you hear Andy?
Just lost your audio there, Andy. Yeah, you're back now.
Yeah, we lost you there for a few seconds, Andy.
Yeah, so I'm just changing this picture so that we can understand what the functions are in these different areas. So yes, we've talked about the products, but in terms of functions, we're talking about connecting and collecting. So collecting that data, where do we store it? We're talking about storing it in our AVEVA Historian. And there's lots of different reasons why you do that. I mean, it's something that's been around for a long time. It's very high performance. It's capable of storing huge volumes of data generated from any of these areas that you see here, natively to all of the product sets that sit in here and things that sit outside of it too. And then it can securely deliver that information to a multitude of devices, be it desktop tools or mobile tools, and Ken will talk more about this. But some of the things it's done very well over the years is ensure that they use really nice compression techniques so that they can have the data stored in minimal form on the device. It's not just storing all the data to a database. And it also delivers an industry standard query interface through SQL, essentially, so that it's open to your other processes and so you can get the data out really nicely. And it is that completely integrated solution. So I've shown that before again, but what I've done is introduce the Historian product and some of its clients that sit alongside that. So from, obviously, they're all the SCADA packages down the left-hand side that you see there. And our AVEVA Historian really does sit across the board, and there's native connectivity to a lot of them, as I mentioned. Then if we look at Historian Client, really we're looking at that granular view of the operators at that plant level that really need to see the detail about something that's happened, and these would be through like a trend tool or perhaps a query tool to understand specific values over different tags. And look at the complete history. And if you integrate that with some of our SCADA solutions, you might be looking at things like replaying SCADA screens using the capability of the Historian of things that are done natively, again, that are built into the products these days. And then something that you may not be aware of is Historian Web. And again, Ken will explain a bit more about this, but this is a built-in web interface that, again, has been around for quite a few years now. But they've enhanced on this, and they have done at every release of the Historian. So some really nice tools that have come and appeared inside there. And then towards the end of the presentation, this is something we haven't mentioned during any of the comms that we've talked about, but I'm going to talk very briefly about Dream Report. Now, Dream Report is a much more capable reporting package than you probably imagine. And hopefully that demo at the end showing that will explain it. And the reason I've extended it slightly beyond Historian Client Web is because it reaches a little bit further than your standard native Historian data, because it does have the capability of extending a bit further out, and it will all become clear towards the end. But we're going to focus on Historian first. So it's certainly a very scalable solution. And if you look at your typical site, we'd install a Historian there at our plant level, and it could connect to one, it could connect to many applications that sit out there. They don't have to be Wonderware or AVEVA, but obviously they have the native connectivity to things like System Platform, to InTouch, to AVEVA Edge, but it can connect directly to PLCs, and essentially it'll connect to anything at that bottom layer. And with the brand that has been built up over those years, they're completely agnostic. And they're agnostic through from your IoT devices all the way up to through PLCs, through these machines, through devices, robots, everything that you can think of, all the way up to things like weather API, so you can understand what the weather information is doing out there. But as obviously times have changed and there's been a whole different scale of things, there's a different type of hardware platform that would be required for this type of thing. So as you start to store more information, these become much more critical, and we do tend to provide, based on customer requirements, completely fault-tolerant servers. And in this case, our latest addition to the Stratus family is the ZTC Edge, and it's a little bit more smaller scale than the FT server that people are probably familiar with. So it works on a slightly smaller scale, but one of the key benefits about this is its fault tolerance over a geographical distance. So if you lost one area, then you wouldn't lose that historian. Whereas if you go up to something that is, huge scale, and the historian can store up to 2 million tags, so we're talking vast amounts of tags, vast amounts of data, that's when you might look out to something that is a little bit more capable in the big FT server. But as I mentioned earlier, this is something that is fault tolerance, but in a single location. And then from a scalability perspective, we've obviously gone the other way as well. So we've gone down to the smaller size, and we're using the same tried and tested technology, but the commercial model's changed slightly. And I'll talk a bit more about that later on. But for now, what I'm going to do is we're going to build this picture up a bit later on with Ken. But for now, Ken's going to take us through some of the latest additions to the historian product and what you can expect to see. So thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, great, good overview there. So I suppose really what I want to kind of focus on is some of the new technical features with Historian, AVEVA Historian 2020, but also just look at the overall strengths of AVEVA Historian, and really with this release, it's never been easier now to get started with the AVEVA Historian. So it offers that natural integration, right across those different supervisory control layers, following that edge to enterprise approach that you've shown us. So we have that native integration from AVEVA Edge to InTouch to System Platform, and of course, the likes of SciTech and support for OPC data sources. So all of that integration, that's given us now a very complete and accurate history of your process data. And as you showed us there, Andy, very scalable solution for your historian on-premise. And of course, Historian provides a number of different analytical client tools, to help our end users troubleshoot, for reporting, to help them improve their process. And really, what we see is a key driver with the 2020 release is it's about how can we make that operational data, your industrial data, more accessible, to all your plant users in a meaningful way. And we're not just talking about those, your plant engineers, but cross quality, across, your management, right across your supply chain. If we can give everyone in the company access to that plant data, well, they can start to, gain value from your process history. They can start sharing data amongst those teams, driving, better business decisions. With AVEVA Historian, you're already collecting and storing lots of data. So really, you need the client, the right tools, to empower your team to use that data. So AVEVA, as you mentioned, Andy, AVEVA continued to add new features to the Historian web client. And again, it's about how can we give very simple, intuitive access to those users from a standard web browser. There's no client software needed to install. It's accessible from a browser on your desktop, your mobile device. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. The 2020 release has also improved support for tiered historian architectures, for those geographically distributed applications. So now you can have simple or summary replication from those tier 1 historians to your tier 2 historian. And you can have simple replication from tier 2 to tier 3 historians and so on. So simple is where we're replicating or pushing all of our data up, or summary where we're just replicating or pushing an aggregate summary of that data. So what this allows you to do is to consolidate all that data at the local site level from multiple sites to a central historian, use it for possibly for central reporting and so on. We still have very powerful statistical analysis tools available with Historian. We'll see with the Historian web client, they've added now this new feature around event-based time slicing. So that's a new feature with the column summary chart. We'll talk a bit now about how AVEVA are offering a very unique integrated historian solution to our end users. So it's one where now you can very easily deploy a hybrid architecture of your on-premise and your online historian solutions. And again, it's about making that information more accessible, not only on plant, but securely outside the plant too. So I'm going to focus on the historian on-premise solution first. And I'm going to start with an example, that example of how can we make this, our operational data, that industrial data, more accessible. So what you can see here is an InTouch HMI screen. We're running a water plant. We're using our standard library of situational awareness symbols, so our operators can view information, on those different filters across the water plant, whether it's our turbidity or filter flow level. We can see hourly averages here. So this is all data being historized by system platform to historian. So how can we make that data more accessible to our end users that don't necessarily need access to a full SCADA HMI screen? Well, what we have is we have the historian client trend, and we have our historian client query, as you mentioned earlier, Andy, and these are both desktop applications that you would install. And we have the historian web client. And I'm going to focus on the trend and the web client today to kind of highlight some of the functionality, how different users or roles within your business can use them. So we're going to start with the historian client trend. So again, typically a plant engineer can come in. We have our tag picker here. They can go and drill down. We have it, you can see our hierarchy of our plant model that we built within system platform. We can select an asset. We can select different tags and our flows, our turbidity, and drag them onto our trend chart. And from there, then very easily we can look at different timelines, whether it's the current hour, last 4, last 8 hours. And so we've lots of different trend options available now. We can go in, we can auto scale as you'd expect, and we can scale our tags up. We can scale them down. And a new feature actually that the 2020 release of Historian, they've added auto precision now to those tag trend options. So the number of decimal places set is automatically based on the value range. So that's something that's enabled by default. So what we can see now is a trend with all our various alarms and our events showing. So all that alarm information that we can see here, that's automatically overlaid on our trend for those measurements. So that's giving us that as alarm context automatically for those measurements that we've configured alarms for. So we can look.
Ken, that's of course alarms coming from our InTouch or our system platform, I'm assuming.
It does, yeah, and and I'll talk a little bit about that. So it's not just system platform now, but with 2020, yeah, those InTouch alarms as well, and Dion, yeah. And that all that information, that alarm context is stored with the tag. So we're retaining that context over time, so we can click on that icon to show, the alarm, when it was acknowledged, who acknowledged it. Again, we can hover over those alarm halos to see those alarm details, the name, priority, duration, severity, and so on. We can also add an annotation, a comment, again, adding more context, what was happening at the time. We need to investigate this and share that with other members of the team. So, some other idea, again, another feature here is the live replay mode. So again, we had an issue at 3 a.m. last night in our shift handover notes. We can go back, to that duration, and we can overlay, the different data that we want to analyze, and we can play back that trend at different speeds to help in terms of troubleshooting and drilling down into the root cause. So you kind of get a sense, it's, what the trend client offers is very granular level of detail, all the options that you need in terms of diagnostics, in terms of troubleshooting, in terms of identifying where are those opportunities in terms of process improvement. So we kind of, by contrast to the historian client trend, if we look at the historian client web. So, straight away what we can see is this is a much more intuitive tool to use. We can quickly search for tags and add them to charts. We can start creating very informative, near real-time dashboards or an overview of our process, our KPI metrics. So here again, across all the different filters that we're controlling, we're monitoring, we have different charts that, to present that data, whether it's a line chart, status board chart showing as the current value, that spark line trend. We can show those summary statistics, again, just like we had in the SCADA HMI screen, that hourly average, or maybe we want to show the min, the max, the average. But because it's a self-serving, yeah, Dan?
Sorry, I just wanted to interrupt you there. I see there's some questions that have come up. I forgot to mention it in the beginning that we will answer all the questions in the end. And I just wanted to also just interrupt you quickly. The web client, that's standard. I just want to understand that right. It is any web browser and it comes, you can use any web browser and it comes standard with every historian.
Yep, absolutely. Standard with every historian. It's supported across all modern HTML5 web browsers. And yeah, I have a slide later on actually that will show that. So yeah, in terms of platform is agnostic in terms of what browser you run this on.
Right.
Yeah. So very easy, unplanned. I can go and bring up this, my historian client web and start viewing dashboards. And, and I said, because, it's not just for looking at dashboard, it's a self-serving analytics tool. So I can click on any of those charts within that dashboard and drill down into that detail. And this is where, again, I can overlay mixed, analog, discrete data. You can see we're showing those same alarm context automatically. I can toggle on and off different tags. 2020 is a nice new feature here where we can edit and remove. So we've added dozens of tags. I can quickly go in and select the ones that I want to remove from my chart to clear it up to help in terms of analyzing that data. So as we build those charts, save them keywords, very quickly we can start building these dashboards. And now a new feature with the 2020 releases, these dashboards can now be made accessible. So we can share a link to that dashboard and embed that in, say, like a 4K monitor that's running alongside our production line. Or we can share this as a link, a shortcut, and actually email that to other members of our team. So if I just copy that link and I copy it to the clipboard, I can switch to Internet Explorer and paste that link in. And now I have my filters dashboard, and that's going to auto refresh depending on the durations that we've defined. So again, it's about pushing that data out, making it accessible, not just only within the historian web client, but also via dashboards, URLs, and slideshows, and so on.
So that's really what you talked about, getting, extending the reach. All you need is web browser. It doesn't matter where you are, just a web browser, and you've got access to your historian data.
Yeah, no software needs to be installed. So yeah. And just going to follow that thread, in terms of that intuitive, simple use. Again, unlike the tag picker where I may need to know where my instrument resides in the hierarchy, I just need to know a description. I can search on that metadata. I know I have a mixer, it's 22, and I can I can see all of my history tags, hit enter, and it's added to my chart. So here we have our status board chart for those selected tags. And very easy then to toggle between the last hour, the last, yesterday, the last, 30 days, retrieving all of that data into my chart. I can switch from my status board chart to my line chart. Again, our discrete tags shown as in a Gantt type chart. And I can see that context in terms of my flows, my temperatures, and so on. And very similar as well, showing that alarm context automatically. From here, I can add comments. And again, add more context to what was happening at the time, share that with the team, help in terms of troubleshooting, diagnostics, really drilling down to finding what the root cause is here. So yeah, and you touched on this, Dion. So with earlier versions of Historian 2017, that alarm context was only presented for alarms detected within system platform, using your limit checking within the application server. So with Historian 2020, AVEVA have extended that support for external alarms. So it'll detect external alarms from your control system. So we can now associate a digital tag, in our PLC with the process value attribute. So it'll automatically show that alarm indication in our trend, and it'll also detect those AVEVA InTouch HMI alarms. So really, really powerful, really extending that functionality in terms of giving us that alarm context to help our users understand what's happening in our process. And similarly here, between our Historian web client, we can view the same comment. So here I have a comment that was added in the Historian web client, and I can view that in the Historian trend client. So that comment is associated with the tag. It remains with that historized data, again, giving you that capability to add more context to what was happening at that particular moment in time. So another example here, more a diagnostics example. So we have a plant that's running batches. We've been told we've had some quality deviations on a number of batches yesterday. So a plant engineer is going to pull up a chart, look at the various, our IG speed, our temperature. We know temperature is it's a critical process parameter, so we can focus on that trend profile. But here now we can switch to that column chart very quickly. And up to now, we've always been able to, again, very quickly, change and look at statistics like what's our min, our max, our average, our total, on different intervals, whether it's every 15 minutes, every hour, daily. What the 2020 releases now is added the ability now to view summary statistics based on an event. So in this case, it could be based on an event by batch. So now we can look and we can see, what are the two batches with the highest temperature, higher temperature than what was expected. And from here, then, with the client web tool, we can drill down into our temperature profile for that batch. Again,
so you could actually have seen the batch number there as well.
Yeah, so we can see the batch ID. We can drill down. Now we have our temperature profile for that batch. We know it's not behaving as expected, and again helping us what's the root cause to that quality deviation. The 2020 release is also the Excel add-in. That's been enhanced now to make it again very simple, much easier now to build custom reports with your historical data. So again, very easy to search for that data, using a similar search feature. From here, then we can select the tags we're interested in. We want to add to our report. We can select, we want to add our description, our engineering units, quickly define what's that time selection, the last day, yesterday, and what are those summary statistics then that we want to report on for our specific tags. Click finish. And now we have a custom report, again, very quickly built inside of our Excel.
And Ken, I know that a lot of users in the past complained that we were only supporting the 32 versions of Word. Is that still the case?
No, with the 2020 release now, it supports Excel 365 with that 64-bit support. Yeah.
Great.
So now we're at a point now where, well, what are the next steps we can take to really extend data access, to really extend the extensibility of your Historian solution? And this is where we can look to AVEVA Insight, AVEVA's online managed historian. What this allows us to do is to build on your existing investments. So in terms of on-premise infrastructure or on-premise historian, and protect that investment but also start to really leverage the wider AVEVA online solutions, the likes of AVEVA Insight. So we can use AVEVA Insight now in conjunction with your on-premise historian and look to deploy a hybrid solution. So this is making your information, that industrial data, more accessible, meaningful. But now we can start using online features like machine learning, like OEE, like condition-based monitoring, predictive analytics, BA gateway. So we can really start to leverage all of those online features with hybrid approach.
And I suppose this is in this changing world of ours, critical at the moment, where people are more remote and they need to get access and do more with the data that they traditionally were dealing with on site.
Yep, and they want to have secure access as well to that data. Yeah, so that hybrid approach, and really this is where we can kind of continue that story you talked about, Andy, in terms of our on-premise AVEVA historian. So maybe for those smaller sites that don't necessarily need or justify an on-premise historian, now we can securely publish or push that data to AVEVA Insight. So again, AVEVA's cloud historian, fully managed by AVEVA. And so that could be a standalone InTouch, that could be a number of standalone InTouches that are publishing their data to the same AVEVA Insight solution. As I say, Dion, making that data accessible remotely, anytime, anywhere in the world to your users. And now, I suppose what we can do as well is, as I mentioned, introduce that hybrid approach, that deployment option, where we can also publish or replicate data from our tier 1 and our tier 2 historians to that central AVEVA Insight solution.
Okay, now we're going to have a more full, so I believe you're going to give us a little glimpse here, but we're still having a full webinar just focused around Insight.
Yeah. So what I wanted to kind of show you now is just how easy that is. So it takes 5 minutes really to securely push that data, or maybe it's a subset of your data from your on-premise historian into AVEVA Insight. And that Insight publisher that you would need for those standalone InTouches, that's already built into your AVEVA historian. So really it's just a few simple steps to add that replication server to AVEVA Insight. And I've shown it here. So here within the system management console, I have my on-premise historian. I can see it's running here. And this is where I can add that replication server in a couple of few steps. So here now I can go into my configuration editor for my on-premise historian. I can drill down to replication, and here I can add a new replication server. So this is the node name of my AVEVA Insight solution. So this is going to be my tier 2 managed historian. I want to click replicate to AVEVA Insight and hit the register button. And now it's going to automatically show us my Insight publisher. And from here, again, for those architectures where your on-premise historian is sitting on a manufacturing network, so segregated from your corporate LAN, by DMZ and firewalls, there are options around DMZ secure link as well. So now we would choose what region. So we have the option in North America. I chose Europe. We can, am I an existing user? If I was a new user, it's very easy to sign up. Actually, AVEVA now, you can sign up for a free 45-day Insight trial. So as an existing user, I've already registered, I can enter in my credentials and sign in to register to my AVEVA Insight solution. So again, I need to give a name for my data source. So we can see already publishing to that AVEVA Insight, we have data coming from our hub in our Cheadle office. We can add manual data, but here, this is going to be our tier 1 on-premise historian. So again, we have multiple data sources feeding into that one Insight solution. We can give a location. Where do we want to store our data within that solution? we can give it a geolocation as well, you know, for those geographically distributed applications. So I can finish this out and just configure the likes of my store forward settings, my naming schema, what tags I want to replicate and push into my tier 2 AVEVA Insight.
And of course, the full store forward, I'm assuming. So if it gets cut off, you won't lose data.
No, if we lose the connection, it's going to buffer locally, and you'll have that data stream then to push and forward that data then once that connection is restored. Yeah. So that's it. They're the steps really to get a tier 2 managed historian configured, you know, and start publishing. So we're publishing data now into that AVEVA Insight. So now I can go to any browser, you know, whether I'm on plant or off plant. I can go to my online.wonderware.eu. I'm using those EU data centers, and I can log in using those same credentials you saw earlier when we were using the publisher. So now I've got, not only I've got all of that filter, that water plant data now has been published and pushed into AVEVA Insight, but we also have the likes now of our newsfeed. So this is where AVEVA Insight is using the machine learning to examine that data over a period of time and alert us automatically to any anomalies in that data. So we can start creating more content, just like we did before with the on-premise web client. As the administrator of the solution, I have control of what users I want to invite. I can edit the dictionary. I can scale this out, our MES efficiency model, define shift patterns. If we look at that data source now, we can see that new data source coming from our on-prem historian, was just published and updated a couple of minutes ago. So now, again, we can start creating very meaningful, informative dashboards. So if we look again at that filter 100 dashboard, we can create, you know, dashboards using, you know, similar charts, whether it's that line chart or that column summary chart. But now we have new features like our map chart. We even have the ability now to create graphics inside our Insight solution. So this is where I can import a SCADA, you know, HMI mimic, and I can overlay that with the history tags that we're historizing within Insight. So I can literally drag on these tags. I can select different widgets and how we want to visualize that data. So here I'm showing my filter 100, my turbidity, I'm showing my level and my flow rate. So I can capture that within that dashboard and share those dashboards again with other members of the team. And another really nice feature with the online is the ability to have condition-based monitoring, condition management. So if I if I stop one of the pumps here, we see the level and our tank dropping to 0. And we'll see up here now, we're going to be notified of an alert. So this is where we can configure alerts within the Insight solution, looking at our data. So we have an active alert for our effluent turbidity. We can drill down into that data and we can see what tags is that alert monitoring. And we can see here how we can, you know, configure that alert. So once we define what tags, we can define the conditions. So do we want to alert on all of these conditions or just or any of these conditions? You know, when that level measurement drops below a particular value or threshold, we can define, we want an email notification. I can add yourself, Andy, Dion, very quickly, those Insight users. We can also define, well, what's the consequence of failure for this alert? Is it does it have a safety impact? Or in this case, an environmental impact. So again, very, very quick.
And I believe one can also integrate it into your EIM system and things like that.
Yeah, so just jump back here. Yeah, so we can define custom alerts, custom actions as well as triggers. So now we have the email notification, we can define those custom triggers as well. So yeah, let's raise a maintenance order based on this condition-based alert.
Right.
So we move this on here. So we have our alert. We get so here's that email notification coming through. telling me we have a turbidity, effluent turbidity alert. So we can see all the detail that's shared as part of that email notification, the value, the last values received, what that consequence of failure is. Another nice feature is, we've pushed all this data up here. All I need to do is search on the asset name. So here I can just search, our tank 100. And this asset information is automatically populated for me. So all the information we have on this asset, you can see my active alerts. There's my news feed, any associated content with this asset in terms of dashboards. We can add digital journal entries here as well. And remember, not only can we capture process data, we can also capture utilization data about our assets and production counter data. So we can really scale the solution out in terms of understanding and monitoring the performance of our equipment. Is it running? Is it stopped? Is it planned or unplanned downtime? What's the reason behind that planned downtime? We can capture that from our historical data from our controllers to really scale that out in terms of giving us that equipment efficiency, understanding the availability of our assets, all the way then to full OE analysis where we're capturing performance losses, we're capturing quality data to give us that OE metric, which of course we can now compare and monitor across multiple sites, multiple production lines, multiple assets.
It's more than just an information platform. Now actually becomes a fully operational platform.
Yeah. So and those and everything I've shown you there with the Insight client, the web client, is available then on the AVEVA Insight app. So all those charts, optimized to run on a mobile app on your smart devices. We can drill into that data. We can add comments. We can view the same charts, dashboards, graphics that you saw on the web client. And we can even, those alerts will come through as push notifications. We can configure new alerts. We can see that same news feed as well that we saw in terms of using that machine learning. And as I said, Dion, you made the point earlier, it's platform agnostic, and whether it's the on-premise Historian client web or AVEVA Insight. These are supported on all, on those modern web browsers and across different devices. Again, mobile devices, agnostic. It'll run on your iOS, your Android devices, and so on. So they're examples really of how you can extend the reach of your data with Insight. And again, the focus is not to replace your on-premise Historian, but how can we supplement it with an online solution? And I said that could be for all of your data. Maybe it's an aggregate summary of that data, or maybe it's a subset of that data, focused on your key process, quality, or efficiency metrics. So it's really giving you the best of both worlds. And we talked about how we can use that for stranded data, with those standalone InTouches. It's also a great use case for our OEM providers, helping them to monitor platform, plant equipment in use, give them the ability now to deliver more value to their end customers. And as you mentioned earlier, so we have that webinar on the 2nd of July, more of a deep dive into AVEVA Insight, and we also have webinars coming up on the likes of AVEVA Edge.
Okay.
So sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah,
good.
Sounds good, Andy. Yeah, so
a few technical issues.
Well, it goes better now. Well, that's great, and this extension into the online environment is really, I think opens the eyes of a lot of people of what can be achieved. But I know there's still some requirements that people need some basic reporting, or maybe more than basic reporting on site. So what can we do about that?
Thanks, Dion. Yeah, so you're right, and I wouldn't call it basic. I think that was probably a Freudian slip, but yeah, it's. I suppose there's lots of reasons why people adopt reporting in their environments. One of the reasons might be for compliance reports, and you can see the different vertical spread. It obviously fits with us very naturally, and Dream Report's been a part of the brand for a long time, but there's certain requirements people had to adhere to, and rather than being in paper-based environments, digitizing that and having specific reports that they can just reel off very quickly is obviously a huge plus in that regard. Ken mentioned a little bit about performance data in the AVEVA Insight platform. And there's obviously lots of other ways that you can deliver that. And one of the ways is actually through very simple functions that you can run, and you can then therefore improve your business based on simple reports that will be displayed based on that. And a lot of the problems, I guess, with these static types of reports is that they are static. But with something like this, what we're referring to here is the ability to do ad hoc reports, so you can use things like the built-in web portals and dashboards to update the data on a much more regular basis and as you see fit, as you need to. It's worth just mentioning a little bit about the architecture, because we've talked about architectures quite a few times, and you can see obviously they have lots of different drivers again that, you know, they're agnostic, so that they can connect to the devices, they can connect to databases. They obviously have native connectivity into our products, but it's also keen to mention that we also have native connectivity from this platform through to things like Siemens, SCADAs or Rockwell, you know, the competition out there, because we know that the environment is not often just a single platform and a single provider that will provide all those solutions. So it's important to be able to connect to all of them. Obviously connect to our AVEVA historian very neatly, and other historians that sit in that space, and now down to things like MQTT for IoT devices. They do have an engine in there, like a data analysis engine, so you can do things like calculations. So it will, you can do things like do the calculations and store in a separate tag inside of the Dream Report history. You can also store real-time data from the real-time SCADAs at the bottom end if you don't have that storage capability into its own history. And then you can present it in the ways that I mentioned earlier through things like web portals and dashboards, or even just PDF reports. And people like things just emailed to them, or Excel, because we know that people still love to use those Excel reports. I've just got a very short video on how you create a report inside of the package, and it just goes from start to finish. And this is really, I mean, we've created data sources to begin with that shows you some historical data sources. So this is essentially our AVEVA historian. In this regard, we're just going to create a new report, give it a name that's meaningful, and this should hopefully highlight how really quick and easy it is to navigate around and change it. And I'm doing it as a daily report to run at midnight. This is just a PDF report. Then we're going to add a statistical table, all automatic. So when you'll see that when you drag it on screen, you get the option of where you want to get the data from. So if you want it directly from its own history, or an external source like a historian, like we are doing here, and we drag a few tags into the list, and then once we've got those listed, we can choose what functions we'd like to display. Or we're going to do the period of time we want to cover it over first. So in this case, we're going to do the current week's worth of data. We're going to look at the first, last, maximum values, minimum, average, and those functions are then automatically in the system based on the data you're producing it with. And we're going to just give it a type of display, give it a name, structure it in a nice way on our screen. This is obviously the design time, so you don't see the values yet until you run it. Then we're going to run another automatic statistical table, but this time we're going to do it for our utilization. So it's going to be based on our mixer tags that exist. The current period, you can see with the fixed period stays the same, but in this case we're looking at performance data. So it's how long the on counter, the off counter, how long it's been running for, those types of statistics. And again, we're not having to store those values in the PLC. It is doing it based on the booleans that it's creating. So the booleans that are being provided to it, telling it whether it's running or stopped. So you just have to provide it with that. We're not doing the calculation separately. Then we're going to display a trend very similar to what Ken's just been showing us lots of in some of his demos. And in this case, we're going to show a couple of temperature profiles. In this case, this is a moving average. Doing it for a couple of them. And you can say it keeps that defined time period. So we're showing the same time period for each of our little widgets we put on screen. Exactly the same. And then the appearance, we're just making it look a bit neater, giving it a title, whether we want a legend and things. And there's our trend built. And then the last thing we're going to do, you're going to see we're insert a new page. And in this case, we're going to just add an alarm table too. So it'll actually allow you to do alarm analysis in this. So we're looking at our alarm data. And again, you can connect to our history alarms, or you can connect to any SQL alarm database if you provide it with the right column names. And we're looking at really like an alarm Pareto chart. So looking at the number of occurrences over our period of time. Just make it look a bit neater. And then we can also apply things like page templates, so we can very quickly get the same look and feel across the board. So we can create them, save them off, and just apply them to them. So once we've done it, we're just going to reload the reports into the project because it's already running the project in the background. And then we're going to generate that report. And it'll load it, and you can see all the values are very quickly populated in there, along with that alarm data at the bottom. And it's worth noting that this is literally just scratching the surface, but it's you know, it's just to show you a quick look and feel as to how quickly you can.
So definitely when we talk about in the beginning there when I said simple, so what I can see now, it's definitely not simple reports, but simple to configure.
Yeah.
No SQL. You didn't do any SQL or anything in there, and you actually produced quite a complex report in literally a few minutes.
Yeah, and it's got so many built-in statistical functions that, I mean, the chances of you actually having to manipulate something before you get it here are so slim. If you really, really want to get into that SQL, and you know, you've got the opportunity to, but there really isn't that need. And it goes beyond this. Every PDF report that's created is static. So one of the good things about PDF reports is you don't need specific licenses for it from us anyway. You may do for the Adobe product or something to display them, but once they're saved, that's it. They are static reports that you don't need to worry about. And it just carry on doing this in this case every day at midnight.
Looks great.
And they are going to be joining us Stream Report for a webinar as well, but we have a date yet to be scheduled, don't we, Dean?
Yeah, we're figuring out when, we don't know when people are going to have holidays this year. So this series of ours is ending the beginning of August. We're not sure if people are going to take holiday in August, so we're still a little bit tentative.
So hopefully that's given you a good insight into some of the different solutions. Obviously there's others out there, there's other ways to do things, but there's some of the key ways of storing and displaying your data. Now I just wanted to link this back to our AVEVA Historian product and talk very briefly on the product lifecycle, and probably something you've seen me mention before. But in terms of our mainstream supports, this is like upon product release, the first 1 to 3 years, you get full product support on the products, technical assistance, patches and service packs, upgrades with a customer first support contract, any fixed requests, things like that. And our current stance on that is that obviously the latest version is supported in mainstream, and also the 2017 update 1 and above. From extended support, so the 3 to 5 year mark, we're talking flat 2017 only at this stage, and then anything older than that, 2012, 2014, it's all immature support. The latest version does require 64-bit operating system and SQL Server. I think it's just a sign of the times, the way things are moving with Microsoft, the supportability of the operating systems, and that does lead me quite nicely onto some of the reasons why people upgrade. You know, that could be a forcing from an IT team. You might want to do it for cybersecurity reasons. You just might want to be running the latest service packs and patches. Or in some cases, as you may have seen in this webinar, it could be due to product enhancements, due to some of those fantastic things that are coming through the product set. And then there's been quite a few questions, so I'll skip through some of this quickly. And this might help with some of the questions that we've had actually, just around things like flexibility and commercial flexibility. So traditionally, we've always been a perpetual business, if you like. So you outlay an upfront cost for your historian, and then you would use it for as long as you need to. You buy customer first, and you can upgrade your software included in that support contract. But what they've now started to do is something called Flex, AVEVA Flex, which is a credit-based subscription model. So you buy your credits over a certain period of time, be it 1, 3 or 5 years, and you use those credits over that period of time. So that allows us to ask slightly different questions and get slightly different capabilities out of the product, rather than having that perpetual model that would say, well, I want to buy a 5,000 tag historian, but actually I've just used 6,000 and I really need the next license. What would I have to do? Well, you then have to move up to the next breakpoint, which might be 12,000 tags or 25,000 tags. So the difference with this is that we ask a couple of very simple questions. So what type of historian would you like? So in this case, it'd be local, tier 1 or tier 2. And Ken talks a little bit about scalability and moving even further than that. So your tier 3, your tier 4. If you purchase a tier 2 as part of this, a tier 2 can be considered anything from tier 2 and above. So you can continue to replicate up and above and beyond. So if you had a tier 2 that was getting data from multiple historians lower down, that could replicate to an AVEVA Insight or so on and so forth. Included in those is the unlimited tag count, which is, there aren't those breakpoints, and this is within the technical limitations. I think that answers one of the questions, because one of the questions here is what's the limit on the number of tags that can be used inside of it? It's 2 million tags per server. So if you get to that 2 million tag mark, then you need to utilize a second server. So it's a vast number of tags. They all support redundant configuration, and it's unlimited retrieval limits in tier 1 and tier 2. So what I mean by that is the local version has been out for a long time. It's a much lower cost, and it allows you to retrieve 7 days worth of data. It can be very useful for people on plant. And then if you replicated that, so if you had lots of sites and you store in the local historian, you could replicate that up to a tier 2 or an AVEVA Insight, and you could get your full access to all that data. And the next question would be, well, what type of historian clients you'd like, and then how many? And then there's, obviously, we've seen a couple in this webinar, and there's desktop, web, or a desktop and web together. They're all concurrent in the Flex model. The perpetual model was slightly different, and it still is slightly different. And if you were using system platform, we include a historian, or you have to use a historian with system platform, because it's the storage engine for it. You buy supervisory clients, which are your InTouch or your InTouch OMI, or AVEVA OMI as it's now called, which are classed as supervisory clients, and this includes access to that history data through those tools on that machine. So it's just simplifying that model from there, and it's providing more flexibility. We've got a couple of minutes left. That takes us to an hour, so I think we've got quite a few questions.
We've got a couple of questions. You answered one already. What's the limit on tags? There's no limit. There's just a physical limit of 2 million. Next one was, if I use historian to monitor all of our InTouch and Cytec sites, how is the connection to the site achieved? Push or pull?
Do you want to take it, or me, Dion? So it depends on the version you're running. They've changed the mechanism very slightly for InTouch. So if it was standalone InTouch, originally you'd go inside the historian and you'd use an import utility that would look at the tag name.x, and it would pull information to it. As part of this latest release of 2020, it now uses a push mechanism. It uses the same HCal push mechanism that application server has always used. So they've adopted that technology. So it's a push rather than a pull there. I'm not 100% sure on Cytek. I think it's the same with Cytek because I think they've adopted the same publisher that they use for that, but I'd probably have to clarify that for you, and we can do that offline, unless you know, Ken.
I think it is the same, yeah. So that's done in integration with storing, but we can double check that.
Next one we've got here is, can the trend package be used within an InTouch application rather than using the standard InTouch trend things? If so, what licensing is required?
So it's integrating AVEVA storing with our InTouch application. I think that is that.
Yeah. It's using it within InTouch instead of the standard InTouch trend.
Yeah. Again, within your InTouch application, so we have historical logging within InTouch, but you can also configure that historization of those tags, your memory tags, to your standard AVEVA historian. Yeah.
And yeah, then there's tools that you can drop into the InTouch package to the .NET controls essentially that you drop in, and then you'd connect that trend .NET control to the historian to view the data, and you can run scripts on that so that you can hide things like the tag trend picker, and you want to display tags automatically, things like that. From a licensing perspective, you'd obviously have to have the historian, and then you need some form of historian client license, so it'd be the desktop client. If you're using system platform, it's slightly different because you can get those InTouch system platform licenses, and they have a with or without historian client license. So there's a few options with that, and then again, it's like
okay. Sorry, I lost sound there for a while.
So the next question there, Dion, was it around, yeah, so we talked a bit about the different options around the historian client, the web client. Will the historian web client use one of our historian clients? So I think Andy touched there on the licensing around that, and again, perpetual versus flex, and it gives you that concurrent license to access either the desktop client or the web client.
Yeah, but the perpetually, if you wanted one or the other, you'd purchase them separately. So
yeah.
It's only with Flex that there's that intermingle that you can do.
Yeah, the separate if it's perpetual, because there's a different cost between the two. The historian client web one is cheaper than the historian client.
Okay, the next one is, can the data be exported in a CSV format from the web client? How quick and how much, if data can be exported?
Yeah, so from AVEVA Insight, for that chart, you have an option, bottom right hand corner, we can click and we can download that data to Excel, CSV format. Yeah, very quick.
Both on premise and web. Okay.
Yeah, there's a little share button in the bottom right that we didn't show during any of the demos, but it's that allows you to save data, export to CSV, and it will export the data that exists inside of that chart for you. So you just have to specify what data you want to be able to display.
Another good question: how well will historian work with WinCC OA SCADA? So that's one I've got some personal experience there.
You can answer, Dion, if you've got personal experience.
Yeah, so yeah, we've always been supporting the open standards. So just by using OPC, we can get data from really any SCADA out there. And I've personally integrated into WinCC, and it works really. I've got a couple of customers that are really happy doing that. Next one is, can you elaborate anomaly detection based on machine learning?
So the one that Ken showed in the AVEVA Insight, that's the cloud-based platform only. That although the look and feel look very similar, there's a definite differentiation between the on-premise web client versus the AVEVA Insight, and we hope that made sense with the transition we did with the different architecture and the scalability. But with the AVEVA Insight that Ken showed, that news feed, and that is unsupervised machine learning. So what that does is look back at the last 2 weeks worth of data and it'll highlight things you might not necessarily been looking at. So it looks at multiple tags and how they're affecting the system. And you can, the way that works is, because it's unsupervised, the only thing you can really do is say whether that information was useful or not to you. What AVEVA Insight have now done is they've extended out to our Prism-based solution, which is predictive analytics. So perhaps it depends whether the areas are a bit grey when you talk about machine learning and predictive analytics, but predictive analytics is not doing it based on trends of information. It's you know, it's not just anomaly detection, it's looking at a whole vast array of data. So the way that works is it looks at your AVEVA Insight information and it will highlight a single tag to show you that there's some sort of anomaly, and you can go and investigate that in more detail. And that will then start to predict when things are going to fail in the future. So a week out, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, so you can start to plan things like maintenance schedules and stuff like that. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that solution we've had, actually we brought it to the cloud, as Andy says, as part of Insight, and it's really, so if you're doing it, so it can do very complex machine learning algorithms, and lots of clients use it on machinery to do like months ahead. It'll tell you, it'll predict problems with machinery like months ahead. Next one is, can multiple system historians be interfaced on a single AVEVA web-based historian?
It could. You'd use the tiering mechanism.
Do they mean that can multiple system historians? What I'm assuming this means is, if you've got multiple historians, if you own multiple historians, can that all go to one single insight? I'm assuming it means AVEVA web-based, it's the Insight.
Yeah, well, if it's a local web-based client or the historian web client, then you'd have to tier your data to a single historian, and then you could use that web client on that single historian with all the tiered data from your multiple historians below.
But multiple historians themselves can tier up to the cloud-based historian.
Yeah,
they can do that as well.
Yeah. So where we had multiple data sources, you know, feeding in, pushing data to that single AVEVA Insight solution. Yeah.
And I think our last question here is, are there limit on tag numbers? I think we answered that.
It's 2 million, yeah.
Okay. So Ken, Andy, thank you very much. That was great. I think we ran over a little bit with all the questions that's been asked, but I think brilliant presentations by both of you. Thank you very much. And our next session is going to be, it's next week, and it's around a very exciting new addition to our portfolio, which is AVEVA Edge. So if you like the edgy stuff, next week is the time for you. So thank you, Andy.
You're welcome, Dion.
And thank you, Ken.
Cheers, Dion.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Bye now.